All right, let's go ahead and move on to section 3.2. The learning objectives for 3.2 are to describe the structures and functions of the old brain and its influence on behavior, explain the structure of the cerebral cortex, its hemispheres and lobes, and the function of each area of the cortex, and define the concepts of brain plasticity, neurogenesis, and brain lateralization. The brain, right? Let's talk about the structures of the old brain. So starting off with the brainstem, right? The brainstem is located at the very very base of your brain. Try saying that quickly. Brainstem is located at the very base of your brain. It connects to your spinal cord. It's responsible for controlling basic life functions like breathing, heart rate, sleeping. You don't have to think about these things. The brainstem just takes care of them automatically. The medulla, that's part of the brainstem. It helps control involuntary functions like breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure. You have these areas called the pons, which is another part of the brainstem. It's located above the medulla. It helps with controlling sleep, coordinating movements like blinking and facial expressions. And then we have something called the reticular formation. This is a network of neurons running through the brainstem. It plays a role in regulating your wakefulness, arousal, keeping you alert, keeping you conscious. We have something called the thalamus that sits on top of the brainstem. It acts like a relay station, sending sensory information like sight, sound, touch, which we'll talk about in a few recordings down the road, to the appropriate parts of the brain for processing. The cerebellum, this is located at the back of the brain, below the larger part called the cerebrum. And it helps with balance, coordination. It allows you to move smoothly and to maintain good posture. We have the limbic system, and that's a group of structures that are deep within the brain. They control emotions and things that drive us. The key parts include the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. Let's continue on with the old brain, wired for survival. So survival functions of the old brain. I'll let you read the slide, but let's talk about the survival functions. The old brain handles essential functions like breathing, heart rate, sleeping. These are things that you don't have to think about, but they're crucial for survival. So basic movements and coordination. It controls basic movements and coordination by helping you walk, helping you run, perform everyday activities without falling over. I was going to make a joke about my basketball playing, but I will let that go. It wouldn't have been a funny joke. Yeah. It deals with emotions and drives. The limbic system that's within the old brain influences emotions and basic drives like your hunger, your thirst, and the need for you to sleep. It also plays a role in forming memories. The amygdala, for example, this helps process emotions like fear and pleasure, while the hippocampus is essential for creating new memories. We talked about arousal and alertness in the previous slide. This is where the reticular formation, it helps keep you alert and awake, and that ensures that you can pay attention to what's happening around you. It has an influence on behavior, right? So you have automatic responses. The old brain controls many automatic responses, such as pulling your hand back when you touch something hot, or jumping when you hear a loud noise. It deals with basic needs. As we said, it drives behavior related to basic needs, like eating when you're hungry, drinking when you're thirsty, and sleeping when you're tired. It also deals with your emotional reactions. So the old brain influences your immediate emotional reactions. For example, if you're feeling scared or you're in a dangerous situation, or you're happy when you see a friend. So the old brain is like the foundation of your brain that controls basic automatic functions and influences your behavior by managing your body's essential needs, emotions, survival instincts. It helps keep you alive and functioning smoothly without you even having to think about it. I think of the old brain and the programming and the functions that are related to the old brain, like if you know anything about microprocessors, the firmware that's within a microprocessor that allows a microprocessor to do all its functions. We have higher level programming where you're on your PC and you open up Microsoft Word, or you open up some higher level program, but a lot of it has to do with how the microprocessor works, right? What are the functions that are actually built into the microprocessor? So your old brain is like that. Everything else is sort of built as higher functions on top of the old brain. So let's dive into the brainstem a little bit more and the thalamus. And these are both super important parts of your brain, the brainstem and the thalamus. The brainstem itself, it's located at the base of the brain, we said. It connects your spinal cord, connects to your spinal cord. And then think of it as the brain's connection to the rest of the body. There are parts of the brainstem that you can learn, like the medulla oblongata. You've heard that before. The pons, the midbrain. The medulla oblongata is the part that controls vital functions like breathing, heart rate, blood pressure. It's what keeps you alive by managing these automatic processes. The pons, that's located above the medulla, helps regulate sleep and coordinates movements, especially those of the face, like blinking and facial expressions. The midbrain, that's above the pons, and it helps with visual and auditory processing and controls eye movement. Talking about the functions, specifically the automatic functions of the brain stem takes care of all the things you don't have to think about, like breathing, heartbeat, and swallowing. Right? When you eat, you don't tell your brain to swallow. You just know it instinctively. It acts like a relay station. We said it acts by sending messages between your brain and the rest of your body. So for instance, it helps transmit signals that control your muscles and sensations. Let's talk about the thalamus, right? The thalamus is located above the brainstem. It's near the center of the brain. It's like a tiny football-shaped structure. It's deep inside the brain. Its main function is like a relay station. The thalamus acts to receive sensory information like what you see, what you hear, what you've touched and tasted, and it sends it to the right parts of the brain for processing. So for example, if you've touched something hot, right, the thalamus helps send that information to the part of the brain that processes touch so that you will quickly pull your hand away. Sensory processing is also done in the thalamus. That's crucial for processing and interpreting sensory information. It makes sure that your brain gets the right signals to understanding what's happening around you. It also helps with regulating sleep and alertness. So the thalamus plays that role in regulating your sleep and consciousness. It helps control your sleep-wake cycles, and it keeps you alert when you need to be awake. Right? You wouldn't want to fall asleep when a bear comes out of the woods or something. Sometimes I get these crazy little topics that I want to talk about. There's a type of goat that faints. I think they're called fainting goats. Every time they get scared, they just pass out. I will actually read more about those because I'm just thinking this might be a good thing to talk about if we get into class and how they work. Yeah, you can look up videos. You scare them a little bit and they just pass out. They fall over. And I think they're called fainting goats, but there might be a proper name for them. Anyway, let's continue. So why do these things matter, right? The brainstem. Imagine the brainstem as the power grid of a city, and it makes sure everything keeps running smoothly, and it manages essential services like power and water. So your body, it keeps you alive by controlling those vital functions. It connects your brain with the rest of your body. The thalamus, or it's the central switchboard operator, and it directs calls, right? So that sensory information, it directs it to the right departments of the brain. And what it does is it ensures that your brain receives and processes that sensory information correctly, appropriately, and it keeps you, like we said before, alert and aware. So I'm really curious now about the fainting goats and their thalamus. So all of this together, the brainstem, the thalamus, all that's essential for survival. It's critical, and it helps you interact with the world around you by managing those automatic functions, processing sensory information, and so forth. Okay, let's go and continue. Next one, brainstem. We're going to go into a little bit more detail into the medulla, the pons, and the reticular formation, which we mentioned before. Let's talk about the reticular formation. It's a fascinating part of your brain that plays a crucial role in keeping you awake. It keeps you alert and it helps you stay ready to respond to the world around you, right? Keeps you alert. I already said alert. It's located in the brainstem. It's at the base of your brain, and again, it's connecting to your spinal cord. So it's not just one specific area, but it's a network of interconnected neurons that runs through the middle of the brainstem. Its function, again, we say it's for wakefulness and alertness. This reticular formation is like your brain's alarm clock. It helps regulate your sleep-wake cycles. It keeps you alert during the day. When you wake up in the morning, the reticular formation helps you feel awake and ready to start your day. So how many of you wake up in the morning from a sleep and you're not completely awake, but you're not so drowsy that you can't get out of bed? You're ready to get up. So you just like a little push off of bed and you're ready to go. You have a good functioning reticular formation. Versus those who are, and again, not because someone worked, 3 days straight and they can't get out of bed. Someone who's just worked a regular 8-hour day, didn't do anything extra, but they still, when they go to sleep, they can't wake up in the morning. We'll talk about that in I don't know, I think it's like chapter 10 or so. It also helps you pay attention, right? So it helps you focus on what's important. So if you're in class and the teacher says something important, your reticular formation helps you pay attention to what's being said. If you're in class and the teacher is actually lecturing and you're talking to your neighbor, your friend, about something that's not related to the class at all, we should look at what's causing that deviation to you paying attention in class. We also said that this is important for arousal. So the reticular formation helps control your level of arousal, which is how awake and how responsive you are. So it can make you feel more alert in exciting or dangerous situations, which you want to be. The bear coming at you in the woods, you want to, be very, very alert. Or it can help you calm down when you need to relax. So maybe the situation calls for, what do you say when you play dead with the bear? So maybe the kind of situation where you don't want to react suddenly, or you'll frighten the animal, which will come and attack you. And so the proper thing would be to relax. And so this would all be controlled there in your reticular formation. It also helps filter information. So it filters out background noise, distractions, and it allows you to focus on what's actually important. So if you're reading a book in a noisy room, your reticular formation helps you concentrate on the book and ignore the background noise. There's a scene in, I won't get into too many of these side stories, I promise. There's a scene in Sherlock Holmes, the movie with Robert Downey Jr. And this is right after he's insulted his Dr. Watson's fiancée. They both storm off, or she storms off. He goes after her, and he's alone there in the restaurant. They give him his meal, and it's just noise. Everyone's talking, and for a second, oh no, actually I think it's before they show up. It's just noise. Everyone's talking all at once, and then he focuses and he filters out all that noise. With someone who can do this, they can actually focus on a single conversation inside a noisy room like that. So it's a pretty good skill to have. There are birds who have an incredible skill to be able to isolate very specific noises in the loudest of rooms, and they can actually filter out what everything else would be considered noise and focus on that one sound way better than any of our audio microprocessors can do. And I want to say it's what's that bird that mimics you? Anyway, I won't get off into too many side stories. We said it's important because it helps you stay awake, helps you stay focused. It would be hard to stay awake or pay attention without it. It helps you respond quickly to things that are happening around you. It helps you respond to important stimuli and not overreact to stimuli that's not important. If someone calls your name in a crowded place, the reticular formation would help you hear it. It'll help turn your attention to the person calling you. We also said it helps with sleep regulation. It plays a major part in regulating your sleep patterns. It helps you wake up in the morning, helps you fall asleep at night. And just imagine that you're like in a busy library. The reticular formation is like the librarian who helps you focus on reading your book by filtering out all that background noise of people talking and moving around. It keeps you from getting too distracted by every little sound or movement, so you can concentrate on what's important. It helps you be mindful. So the reticular formation is that key part of the brain that helps you stay awake, alert, focus, and it makes sure that you pay attention to important things, filter out distractions or things that are not important, and respond to things around you that need your attention. So I think we covered that really well. Medulla pons, I'm not going to cover that. Reticular formation might be new to you, so I just spend more time on that. Let's go ahead and continue with the thalamus and the cerebellum, or the little brain. So the thalamus, where is it located? We said it's located deep in the center of the brain. It sits just above the brainstem. It's about the size and shape of a walnut. It acts like a relay station. It relays sensory information. It receives the information from your senses, and we'll talk about the senses a little bit later, like your smell, and then sends it to the appropriate parts of the brain for processing. So for example, let's say you touch something hot again, and the thalamus helps direct that information to the part of the brain that says, this is hot, remove your hand quickly. It's used for sensory processing. It processes inputs like your vision, your hearing, your taste, touch, and what it does is it just makes sure the signals reach the right areas of the brain. It sends the right information. It sends the information to the right departments so that that information can be processed. Right. And there are disorders where people get these signals crossed, where they get information sent to the wrong departments, we'll say the wrong areas. If you've heard of people who can actually, they see sound, right? So there's something that's crossed in their brain, and this is where it's at, where every time they hear a sound, maybe different colors will change in their visual, in their vision, or they'll see, dots or something. It's an interesting cross wiring. So thalamus, we said it regulates your consciousness and actually helps with the alertness. So it helps regulate the that level of consciousness. It plays a role in keeping you awake and aware of your surroundings. It also helps with that sleep-wake cycle. The cerebellum is located at the back of the brain. It's underneath the larger cerebrum, and it's behind the brainstem. So it's often referred to as the little brain because of its distinct appearance and its location. It's used for coordination and balance, that's its main function, or one of its main functions. So it's crucial for coordinating your movements and maintaining balance. So think of an athlete who does something very complex. Oh, a gymnast. Gymnasts are really good, or a ballerina or something. The amount of control that they have to have in the coordination for the movements that they make. What it does, it ensures that the movements are smooth, they're precise. Imagine how smooth a ballerina or what's a guy ballerina? Ballerina person. They move, they're smooth, they're all that. So it's used for all that. For you, if you're not a professional dancer or I shouldn't say professional dancer. Yeah, professional dancer like a ballerina or a professional athlete. It'll help you with your regular walking, running, maybe playing sports in the neighborhood. It helps you move as gracefully as you can, and it just helps you stay upright. Not insulting you, I'm just saying you all are probably not athletes or professional ballerina dancers. It helps with motor learning, so it plays that key role in motor learning, which is it's that process of improving your movements through practice, and you might call it muscle memory. Sorry. So it's important for activities like playing an instrument, you're riding a bike, or if you're learning to type. So it's that repetitive motion that your muscles get used to that. It also helps with posture and your equilibrium. So the cerebellum helps you maintain your posture to stand up straight. It helps you with your equilibrium, meaning your balance. And it just makes sure that you can stand, sit, and move without falling over. Right? Stand, sit. I was going to say lay down, but no. It also helps with fine-tuning movement. So um, it fine-tunes your voluntary movements and ensures that they're accurate and coordinated. Think of when you're playing, the best thing I can think of right now is a video game, and you're learning the new moves, hit this button, move this joystick up, and so forth. And at first, it's very hard for you to do it. You have to think about it. And then after a while, you get better at it, or you can do those automatically. But you're still not able to control how far the character moves, and maybe you go too far, too slow. But then after a while, you're so good at it, just the tiniest nudge of the controller and the button or something, and you're moving around the game because you've refined those fine motor movements. Um, so yeah, okay, and kind of why they matter is because this is what we do to increase, I won't say competency, mastery. This is what we do to increase mastery, right? Especially when you're talking about motor movements. So thalamus, it's that busy air traffic controller at an airport. It directs all that information, the sensory information, to the correct destinations. It helps everything run smoothly, ensures the brain processes the sensory information accurately, and it helps keep you alert and aware. The cerebellum, it acts as a conductor of an orchestra. It makes sure that all the musicians, like all the muscles, play in harmony to produce that beautiful concerto, I guess. Um, and again, it's essential for balancing and coordinating all those activities. And that's it. Let's move on to the next slide. We're going kind of slow. 7. The limbic system. Let's go ahead and talk about the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. So the limbic system, it's a group of important structures that are in your brain. They work together to control emotions, memories, and the basic drives like your hunger and your thirst. So the main parts of the limbic system, as I said, are the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, which we'll discuss on this slide. The amygdala is a small, it's like almond-shaped structure. It's located deep inside the brain. Its main function is the brain's alarm system, basically. It helps you uh, feel emotions like fear and anger, and it prepares your body to respond to danger. So if you see a snake, the amygdala helps you feel scared and tells your body to get ready to run away. The hippocampus, that's located next to the amygdala, and it kind of looks like a seahorse. It's like your brain's memory maker. It helps you form new memories and remember things. So, for example, it helps you remember what you had for breakfast or how you get to school. It might also help you remember the difference between a coral snake and the other snake, which is the red and yellow and the red and black snake. Red, black, yellow, red, black, yellow. They have the same colors, but they're in different patterns. Red touch yellow, kill a fellow. Red touch black, friend of Jack, kind of thing. Yeah. The hypothalamus. Again, it's a peanut-sized structure. It's located below the thalamus. That's why it's called the hypothalamus. Hypo meaning below. Again, it functions as the brain's thermostat and control center. So the hypothalamus regulates those basic needs and functions such as hunger, thirst, body temperature, sleep. It helps control your body's hormones. It communicates with the pituitary gland, which we'll talk about later. Pituitary gland, the master gland, I think. The thalamus, we said the thalamus is above the hypothalamus because the hypothalamus is below the thalamus, and that is located in the center of your brain. It acts like, we said again, I'm repeating myself, it acts like the relay station, sending that information, the sensory information, except for smell, to all the right parts of your brain for processing, and it helps you become aware of things around you. We have a couple other things I want to talk about, like the cingulate gyrus. It's not mentioned on this slide, but it's, again, located above what's called the corpus callosum. You might have heard of that. It's that part that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And it it's involved in processing emotions and regulating behavior. Let me see what we got in the next slide. No, let's keep going. Sorry. Oh, I can't go backwards. Oh, okay. That's terrible. Yeah, okay, that's enough. That's more than enough for that last line. Let's go ahead and jump into the cerebral cortex. Right? So it says, in addition to the old brain, humans have a large and highly developed outer brain layer known as the cerebral cortex. So if the old brain is your microprocessor, which has programs, has programming, and it actually controls and interacts with things, it has basic functions that allow your big computer, right, to actually operate. Like your Intel processor allows you to run Windows, or your Apple, operating system. You can kind of look at these the same way, right? Cerebral cortex is just that outer layer of the brain physically. It's the part of the brain that makes you smart. It helps you think and remember. And let's look at the, I guess, just a simplistic way of the anatomy, right? So the cerebral cortex is located as the outermost layer of the brain. It's that wrinkly part of the brain that you're used to seeing in movies or pictures. It looks like a big walnut. Hopefully this doesn't keep you from eating walnuts. It covers the entire surface of the brain. It's full of folds and grooves, and that gives those folds and grooves are for to give it larger surface area, and it helps you pack in more brain cells. So that's why they look that way. There's a frontal lobe, and that's just located at the front of the brain, right behind your forehead, and that's the part of the brain that it's your brain's control center. Right? It makes decisions, solves problems, and plans things. So it also controls movements and helps you speak. So think of someone who has a big forehead, right? In movies you see somebody with a big forehead, you think, well, that person's smart, like Megamind, the cartoon. He has a big frontal lobe. The parietal lobe, that's behind the frontal lobe and at the top and center of your brain, excuse me. And it processes information from your senses like touch, taste, and temperature. I didn't say smell. It helps you understand where things are in space, like when you're reaching for a glass of water, it gives you information as to the relative position of that glass of water to where you're standing. The temporal lobe, these are located on the sides of your brain, near your ears, on both sides. The function of the temporal lobes are used for hearing and understanding language. They help you remember things like your favorite song or the names of your friends. And then we have the occipital lobe, that's at the back of the brain. And the main function of that is, that's where your visual cortex is at. So it helps you see everything. So when you look at a picture or you read a book, the occipital lobe helps your brain make sense of these images. So even reading, even text. So text is nothing more than symbols that actually represent, something else, like words. And so even though we're looking at symbols to make words, they're still pictures, and your brain's interpreting them that way. Other parts would be the motor cortex. That's located in the back part of the frontal lobe. It controls voluntary movements like waving your hand or if you're jumping. There's the sensory cortex that's located in the front part of the parietal lobe, and that processes sensory information from all over your body, like when you feel the texture of a blanket. There's something called Broca's area. You might know this one. This one's it's named after someone. It's found in the frontal lobe, and that's what helps you produce speech. I think it's because someone with the name Broca got injured in that area, and it affected their speech, and that's how we came up with the name. Wernicke's area, this is found in the temporal lobe, and this helps you understand speech and how all of this works together. So imagine we're playing that video game, and the frontal lobe helps you plan your moves, decide what to do next. The parietal lobe helps you sense the controllers in your hands and understand that game layout. The temporal lobe lets you hear the game sounds or remember how to play it based on the sound, the music, everything. The occipital lobe processes the images on the screen so you can see what's happening. So the cerebral cortex, it's that outer layer of the brain, and it controls many important functions like thinking, sensing, moving, speaking. It's divided into those different lobes. Each one of them has their own special job, and they all work together to help you interact with the world around you. So imagine if you get into an accident and you have injury to one part of your brain, and that actually affects your behavior. So a doctor can actually uh, surmise something from that, from doing a neurological examination. All right, continuing with the cerebral cortex. We said it helps create consciousness and thinking in a way that's kind of easy for you to understand. It's also referred to as gray matter, right? This is a part where we say gray matter. That's that cerebral cortex, responsible for those higher level brain functions, thinking, consciousness, decision making. So when we talk about consciousness, this is your awareness of yourself and your environment. So when we say someone's conscious, that they know they exist, right? We know this about ourselves. I don't think we know this about other life forms on the planet, but we speculate on that. The cerebral cortex plays that role in processing and integrating information from all over the body and the world around you, your environment. So if we look at the frontal lobe again, this is where decision making occurs. It's the lobe that helps you make choices, it plans for the future, helps you problem solve. Personality and behavior, it plays a role in controlling your behavior and your emotions. For example, if you decide how to react in different situations, imagine you hear some bad news, right? It'll help you control how you act in different situations or react in different situations. Parietal lobe, we mentioned that. This helps you with spatial awareness. Right? It helps you understand where your body is in space and how to navigate the environment. But it does this by integrating sensory information around you, like touch, visual data, and it gives you a sense of where you are with things that are around you. The temporal lobe, we mentioned a little bit that it has to do with memory learning. It's crucial for processing memories, understanding language. It helps you remember past experiences. It helps you learn new information. It's critical for hearing and for speech. It's involved in processing sounds. It helps you understand speech. It contributes to your consciousness and how you experience the world. The last one was the occipital lobe, which was in the back. We said that was mainly for visual processing. It's responsible for interpreting all the visual information. It allows you to see, make sense of what you're looking at. It's a key part of being conscious of your surroundings visually. Consciousness and thinking. So let's get to the thinking part. That was just consciousness. So thinking involves this range of mental processes like reasoning, problem solving, creativity. It's how the cerebral cortex helps with the tasks. So integration of the information, the cerebral cortex will collect and integrate information from different parts of the brain and the body. Imagine you're solving a math problem and your brain combines visual information, like when you see the problem. It combines memory, recalling the math rules that you learned from class, and your reasoning skills for you to have a process for solving the problem. Helps you with communication between the brain areas. So different areas of the cerebral cortex that communicate with each other. They process complex thoughts. So when you write an essay, for example, your frontal lobe will plan and organize your work. Your temporal lobe will try to put your ideas into words. And so forth. They act like neural networks in the cerebral cortex. When it comes to thinking, there's these billions of neurons. They all form these networks. The networks are like the brain's communication highways, as we said in the very beginning of our lecture. And they allow for as efficient, fast exchange of information that you need for thinking and for being consciousness. All of this works together, and it works. You can think of something where you have to combine motor, affective, and cognitive, like playing a sport, right? You're really passionate about a sport. Let's talk about professional sports. right? Those people wouldn't be playing that sport unless they were passionate about something about it, and so they know it very well, so they're cognitive. They love it, so they're effective, and all that affects their psychomotor, their how they actually function at the sport. So when you go to the frontal lobe, it helps you decide these strategies like whether to pass or shoot. The parietal lobe makes the athlete aware of their surroundings, where their teammates are, where they're located on the court. The temporal lobe will help them remember the rules of the game and understand what they should and shouldn't do. And then the occipital lobe, right, that actually will let them see the ball, the hoop, and it helps them with aim. So it processes all that visual information. All of these are handled by these different parts of the cerebral cortex. They all work together, and they help you, or they help the athlete, uh, create that experience. Right? It helps them make decisions, helps them interact with the players and everyone around in the game and the audience. Yeah, the spectators. Um, it's just an intricate network of neurons and brain regions, right? Just to help you be aware of yourself and your surroundings, and it enables higher level thinking and problem solving. So playing a sport, let's just say something like basketball, requires all of these areas of the cerebral cortex to work in harmony together. So it's a very, we can't call it a purely physical or a psychomotor or behavioral action when it involves all of the cognitive and affective traits as well. A lot of thinking in sports. You just sometimes they do it because it comes so natural. Again, just to reiterate, the four lobes of the brain of the the cerebral cortex, we have which is the outer layer, and how they have different functions. Frontal lobe, decision making, problem solving, motor skills, which is right behind the frontal. Speech production, Broca's area, that's also in the frontal lobe. Personality, behavior. The parietal lobe, this is near the top and back of the brain, behind the frontal lobe. It's for sensory information like primary sensory cortex. Processes sensory information from the body like touch, temperature, pain. It gives you spatial awareness, understanding where you're at in relation to your environment. Again, I like to think about the basketball player who has to keep track of where they're going, they're moving, all the players around them, where they're at on the court physically, all of that information being processed. And also the coordination of dribbling and moving, and it's a lot of work when you think of the psychology of playing basketball. Uh, the temporal lobe, we said these are in the sides of your brain. They're near the temples or the ears, and they're mainly used for, or its main functions are auditory, right? So because the auditory cortex is located there, it helps you process sounds, understand language. It's useful for memory, so it's crucial for forming new memories as well. So if you're developing strategies, you need to have memories in place. It helps you understand language, so not just speaking, but understanding. And it helps regulate your emotional responses. So it plays a role in processing those emotions and informing new, what are called emotional memories. If we go back to our basketball players, and specifically with the temporal lobe, they do get very emotional. Right? So, and that may just come with the entire package of being a professional player. The occipital lobe, we said that's in the back of the brain, and again, to reiterate, it's the primary visual cortex, and it processes all the visual information. And all of these kind of work together. If you think about a basketball player, I'm just picking basketball players, but there's other sports that require all of these um, areas to be working coordinated together and because it's very athletic. It's very involved with the motor cortex. I would say something like a piano player, right? The fingers are fine movement, and there is movement there too as well. There's a lot of thinking, there's memory, there's sound, but again, they're focused on their hands. That's where, let's say, a basketball player is focused on their entire body. A lot of coordination has to go along with that. All right, motor cortex. So we sort of talked about these, but not into too much detail. So A little bit of anatomy of the motor cortex and the sensory cortex, which are two areas of the brain that control movement. The motor cortex is located in the frontal lobe of the brain, right behind the frontal lobe, specifically along a strip that's known as the precentral gyrus. The structure is divided into two main parts, the primary motor cortex and the premotor cortex. And the primary motor cortex, this is the part of the motor cortex that sends signals to your muscles that tells them to move. It's involved in the voluntary movements like waving your hands or kicking a ball, so skeletal muscle mainly. Somatotopic organization, this is the primary motor cortex that's organized like a map of your body. Different parts of the cortex control different parts of the body. This is called the motor homunculus. So for example, one area controls your fingers, another controls your toes, and so on. And the areas that require finer movements, like your hands and face, well, they have larger representations in this part of the cortex. We have the premotor cortex, which is used to help you plan and coordinate movements. It's involved in preparing your muscles for movements that you're just about to make. Imagine that you're a one of those motocross jumpers, people who race and jump in the air with the motocross bikes and they do all those flips. And there's probably a lot of visualization and preparation that's happening in their premotor cortex, tightening certain muscles, getting ready, getting into like a position to help them be ready for that flip. Or what's a good one? The divers, those high jump divers. Yeah, you can tell I don't watch a lot of sports. The high dive divers. Anyway, let's keep going. You get what I mean. They do all those coordinated movements when they jump off the high platform and they have to enter the water at a certain position and so forth. All right, let's jump to the sensory cortex. Right, this is located in the parietal lobe of the brain, and again, it's along a strip called the postcentral gyrus structure. It's made up of the primary somatosensory cortex, and this primary somatosensory cortex receives and processes information from all over the body. It helps you feel touch, pressure, pain, temperature. What the somatotopic organization for this, just like the motor cortex, the primary somatosensory cortex, again, is organized like a map of the body. It's also known as the sensory homunculus. And again, different parts of the cortex respond to different parts of the body. Areas with more sensory receptors, like your lips, your fingertips, have larger representations. And all of this works together for movement and sensation. So when you decide to pick up a pencil, your premotor cortex plans the movement. The primary motor cortex sends signals to your hand muscles to grab the pencil, and as you hold the pencil, primary somatosensory cortex processes the feelings of the pencil in your hands, including like the texture, the weight, if the pencil is too sharp or if it needs to be sharpened, and so forth. It works to help with coordination, motor cortex and sensory cortex. Right, they're always communicating with each other, so they coordinate the movements. It's like a feedback signal that helps you coordinate fine motor movement. Yeah. A real world example, and I may ask this as a question on the test, not on a test, on a quiz, just to see if you can actually put all of these things together. You know what, maybe like a homework assignment to explain what's involved when you're sitting next to someone that you want to kiss, and you're everything from the desire to kiss to the actual kiss itself. I think I'm going to ask you a essay question on this as a quiz. No, not an essay, a quiz, a homework. I'll ask you this on a homework assignment. I think that'll actually help you put everything together. As much processing information and relating to cortex as possible on the answer. All right, let's talk about the visual and auditory cortex. So the visual cortex is located, we said, in the back of the brain, the occipital lobe, its job is to process visual information, so it helps you see and understand what you're looking at. So when light hits your eyes, it sends signals through the optic nerves to the visual cortex, and then it interprets those signals and it turns them into images that you can recognize, like faces, objects, or scenery. The auditory cortex is found on the sides of your brain and the temporal lobes, and it's near your ears, obviously, so that kind of makes sense. And that is used to process auditory information that helps you hear and understand sounds, words, language. So when sound waves enter your ears, they're converted into electrical signals by your inner ear. We'll talk about that more specifically, how that happens. And the signals travel through the auditory nerves to the auditory cortex, and then the auditory cortex interprets those signals and helps you recognize sounds like music, speech, and then environmental noise too, things that are just not that necessary. And we'll leave it there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, two important concepts. I hear neuroplasticity, but I never hear it explained well. Neurogenesis, you can kind of understand what that means just from the word itself in medical terminology. But neuroplasticity is just like your brain's superpower to change and adapt. It works like when you learn something new or you practice some new skill, your brain makes these new connections between neurons. And it's like adding new paths into a big forest so you can get to places faster and easier. And what this does, it'll help you learn, remember things, get better at activities, especially new activities, and recover if you ever have a brain injury. So it'll help you. The more plastic you are, the easier you recover. Neurogenesis is just like what it sounds like, formation of new neurons. So it's when your brain creates those new neurons for, let's say, neuroplasticity or for injury. So even though most of your neurons are made when you're a baby, your brain can still make some new ones, especially in areas that help with like learning and memory. So you're constantly making new ones, but not as many as when you were born. So making new neurons is a way that your brain stays healthy and keeps you sharp as you learn new things and experience new activities. That's it. Plasticity, neuroplasticity is just the brain's ability to change and make connections when you learn or practice something new. Neurogenesis is just that ability to create those new neurons that help you with learning and memory. This is a very long lecture. Let's talk about brain lateralization, specifically the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. So when we say brain lateralization, that just refers to the idea that you have two halves of your brain. We call those hemispheres, and they're specialized for different tasks. So, for example, the left hemisphere on this side of the brain, that usually works better at tasks that involve logic, language, and analytical thinking. So, for example, if you're speaking, you're writing, you're solving math problems, these are typically handled by the left hemisphere. And you might have heard, you know, like someone's left brain, someone's right brained. You're both brained. It's just that you may have one part of the brain that's functioning more dominant than the other. The right hemisphere, this is the side that's usually better at tasks that involve creativity, spatial ability, recognizing faces, emotions. So, for example, you're an artist, you like to draw. You understand maps, you appreciate music better. You can, all that's typically handled in the right hemisphere. We talked about the corpus callosum earlier. It's that thick band of nerve fibers that connects both the left and right hemispheres together. And what this does, it allows the two hemispheres to communicate and share information. So think of it like a bridge that lets messages travel between the left and right sides of the brain. We have something else called the Gazzaniga's research on split brain patients, right? So this is very important. There's a guy named Michael Gazzaniga. He was a neuroscientist. He studied patients who had their corpus callosum cut. And this was a treatment that was done to treat severe epilepsy. Right? So people who have epilepsy and they get those epileptic seizures, their right brain and their left brain, the communication across that corpus callosum is just like noise. And so imagine your muscles just shaking. There's no coordinated movement. There's nothing happening that's making any sense. So one of the treatments was to cut the corpus callosum. And then people could actually operate just fine unless they lost visual perception in one of their eyes. You close one of their eyes, like their right eye, which was connected to the left brain, then they couldn't do things that were associated with the left brain. If you closed their left eye, which was connected to the right brain, they couldn't do things that were associated with the right brain. But if they had both their eyes open, they could function just properly. It's interesting. So he studied patients, and he discovered that independent function within the brain, the strengths and weaknesses, and what was controlled by the right and what was left. So it helped compartmentalize and sort of map out more of the functions between the right and left hemispheres. Um, just continue. We're almost done with this section. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere, corpus callosum. It says connects left and right hemispheres. Again, just to kind of reiterate, it's a thick band of nerve fibers and it's located in the middle of the brain, but it connects the right and left hemispheres. It allows them to communicate with each other. Think about like an engineer, right? And an engineer is very, analytical, and they're calculating all the stresses and things that a structure can handle to make sure it's safe. But it may not, the structure that they're building may look horrible, or it may not actually be functional, but it's going to be safe. So then you have like this creative side of someone who actually goes in there and puts some creativity to something to make a structure functional. And so that's kind of like looking at both halves of the brains working together. But every individual can do it. It's just that you may be dominant on one side over the other. Some individuals are actually very good at both. So again, we said this bridges nerve fibers between both sides of the brain. They send messages back and forth. They share information, right? So you can have something that's logical, analytical, something that you know that works, but you also have a side of your brain that works with creativity. And again, that actually helps you try new things. So that right side of the brain, being creative, will help you come up with unique solutions that your left side of the brain doesn't have, right? It helps you come up with the new stuff. Which is what creativity is good for people who are analytical thinkers. That's it. What else can I talk about this? Yeah, corpus callosum. It's just that bridge. It matters because the left and right hemispheres need to work together to conduct these complex tasks. And we call that whole brain functioning. That's what the corpus callosum is for. We're almost done. This is a long part of the lecture as well. Takeaways from this section. The old brain, including the brainstem, medulla, pons, reticular formation, thalamus, cerebellum, amygdala, hypothalamus, and hippocampus, regulates basic survival functions such as breathing, moving, resting, feeding, emotions, and memory. The cerebral cortex, made up of billions of neurons, is divided into the right and left hemispheres and into 4 lobes on each side. The frontal lobes are primarily responsible for the sense of taste, thinking, planning, memory, judgment, decision-making, and personality. The parietal lobes are primarily responsible for touch, knowing our body position. The occipital lobes are primarily responsible for vision, including detecting colors, shapes, and motion, and as well as reading. And the temporal lobes are primarily responsible for hearing, smell, and facial recognition. We're a few more slides. We're done. More takeaways. Areas of the cortex act as association areas, are responsible for integrating information. Motor cortex controls voluntary movement. I'm just going to read this much faster. The sensory cortex receives and processes bodily sensations. And the left cerebral hemisphere is primarily responsible for language and speech in most people, whereas the right hemisphere specializes in spatial and perceptual skills. I won't read the whole thing to you. Corpus callosum connects the 2 cerebral hemispheres. If it's cut, it creates that split brain patient. There's studies been done with the split brain patient. And the brain changes due to experiences and physical damage and processes known as neuroplasticity. And new brain neurons are created through a process called neurogenesis. And that's it. This is the learning objective for the next section, 3.3. Compare and contrast the techniques that scientists use to view and understand brain structures and functions. So in the next section, we are going to cover this. Thank you very much for your time.